everybody, welcome to WTF Hammer Underworlds. So moving on to the next Season 4 Warband review, we're going to be looking at the Crimson Court, who's set to be released pretty soon this month, and who basically arrived in Beastgrave by chance, and is taking advantage of the fact there are many individuals already in Beastgrave trapped there for them to feast on. As I always do, I'm going to be looking at this Warband's fighter cards, their faction-specific cards, that being their objective and power cards. Then I'm going to be rating this Warband and comparing them to all other Warbands that I have rated thus far in terms of how they generally perform across all meta, at least theoretically. So, starting by looking at this Warband's fighter cards, we have 4 very cool vampire units, all of which are very tough, very durable with 4 wounds, and who have a slew of rules written on them. I don't really know if it'd even be possible to fit more rules on these cards. And who have a sort of interesting Inspire mechanic and a reverse Inspire mechanic, the reverse Inspire being their Bloodthirst, where they become a bit more feral and wild, which is in contrast to their Inspired condition, where they become a bit more refined. And talking about it generally is a bit confusing, so I'm just going to start by zooming in on their leader, Prince Duval, who is a hunter. In fact, every member of this warband is a hunter, and he's also a wizard, which is very cool, but only a first-level wizard before and after being inspired. And getting into the actual Bloodthirst and Inspire mechanic, the way that Bloodthirst works is if any of these units acquire 3 or more hunger counters, they basically become bloodthirsty. They get the Bloodthirst condition, and it imposes some kind of a penalty and advantage on them, the effect being different for each of the fighter cards. So in the case of Prince Duval, he becomes less accurate and more damaging. He gets -1 dice to a minimum of 1, and +1 damage on his Possessed Blade attack when Bloodthirst kicks in. Whereas in contrast, in order to become inspired, he must have 0 hunger counters on his fighter card, which you can see from the inspired side basically just gives him cleave, but also gives him 2 block defense instead of the 1 that he starts with. He retains the 4 move and the 4 wounds, but also gets a spell reaction, which can be cast on a channel, in which after this fighter's attack action takes a target out of action. If this is cast, choose an enemy fighter within 4 hexes and push the chosen fighter up to 2 hexes closer to this fighter. So it allows him to lure in enemies after he takes another enemy fighter out of action, which is very cool. And the whole hunger mechanic operates similarly on all the cards. There's the curse and then there's the hunger reaction. So the curse is that at the start of each round, give the fighter a hunger counter. So at round 1, round 2, round 3, for sure each of these fighters is getting a hunger counter, which could even make them uninspired if they were inspired already. But the moment they use an attack action that takes an adjacent enemy fighter out of action, they can remove 1 or more hunger counters, allowing them to inspire immediately if you so choose. Okay, and this is how it works with all of the fighters. So I won't be reiterating the curse and the hunger mechanic. And anyway, that's Prince Duval. Let's move on to the next fighter, which is Anais Curseborn, who has 4 movement, 1 dodge, 4 wounds, going from 3 swords, 2 damage to 3 hammers, 2 damage when inspired. And when inspired, is also able to move through blocked and occupied hexes and cannot be dealt damage by lethal hexes, so similar to ghost movement. But when he succumbs to his Bloodthirst, he gains +2 move, bringing him up to 6 move. So pretty interesting trade-off depending on the direction that you want to go. Next, there's Gorath the Enforcer, who is a wizard as well, who has a mace, which has range 2, 2 hammers, 2 damage, going to 3 damage, getting knocked back if he inspires. None of his other stats change. 4 move, 1 shield, 4 wounds, but gets a spell action cast on a channel, which if cast, choose 1 friendly fighter within 4 hexes and 1 enemy fighter within 4 hexes. Remove 1 hunger or wound counter from 1 of the chosen fighters and give it to the other. So a pretty cool way of controlling wounds or hunger counters. Bloodthirst, on the other hand, gives this guy -1 move to a minimum of 0 and +1 wounds, bring him up to 5 wounds, 3 move. So good benefits whichever direction you decide to go in. And finally, there's Velis von Fane, who's a hunter with a melee attack, 2 hammer, 2 damage, getting cleave and ensnare when inspired, and going perpetually on guard when inspired, which is very nice. And similar to the other fighters, has 4 move, 1 shield, 4 wounds, and gains scything if she becomes bloodthirsty. So all very interesting cards for sure. There are some pros and some cons. Starting with the pros, we have some special combat abilities here. We have Cleave, we have Ensnare, both coming from Inspiration, and Scything coming from Bloodthirst. And they have some special abilities. They have the whole Bloodthirst mechanic that I've described in a lot of detail, the Fiendish Lure spell, the Vile Transference spell. There's a Reach attacker. There are 2 wizards. These guys have high wounds across the board. They all have the Hunter keyword, and they have 4 units, which is a medium model number, which gives them some versatile options. Cons being the generally low defense, so one dodge or one shield, only increasing in some cases. And they also must balance their hunger counters to achieve desired state, which is a con in the sense that it's something that has to be micromanaged, but it's also cool and fun. So, I mean, it's pretty debatable whether or not that's a real con. So that does it for the fighter cards. Let's move on to the objective cards. Starting with the Surge, there is Courtly Hunt worth 1 glory. Score this immediately after the first fighter is taken out of action in this round, if that fighter is an enemy fighter. So pretty nice, worth 1 glory. Since your guys have a lot of wounds, it's likely to happen. I'm going to give this an A. Next, there's Crimson Hound. Score this immediately after an activation in which a friendly fighter made an attack action that targeted an enemy fighter adjacent to one or more other friendly fighters. So very nice card. Giving it an A as well, because you don't even have to land the attack, you just have to make it, which makes it very likely to get scored, but does occupy 2 of your 4 fighters. So it isn't a guarantee, and it does force your actions slightly. There's Preternatural Speed. Score this after an activation if each surviving friendly fighter is in enemy territory, worth 1. Giving this a B, not because it's difficult to score, because it's pretty easy to score, but it does force you to move all your fighters into enemy territory, which might not be a plan that you want to go with at any given moment. Could also force you to use all fighters in the first round when maybe you only want to use 2, depending on the circumstances that arise. So I'm giving it a B. Next is Superlative Skill. A hybrid. Scores immediately after a friendly fighter's attack action that takes the target out of action if the attack roll contains only successes, or that friendly fighter has no wound counters and no hunger counters. So worth 1 glory. I'm giving it a B. It's circumstantial. Definitely no guarantee that you're going to take an enemy fighter out of action on only successes. I mean, that's pretty low odds, to be honest. Having no wound counters and no hunger counters, also very challenging, considering that these guys get a hunger counter at the beginning of each round. So I don't think this is super easy to pull off. Next is Spirited Attempt. Scores immediately after an enemy fighter's attack action that deals damage to a friendly fighter if that friendly fighter is not out of action. So your guy takes a hit and doesn't get taken out of action. So given this an S, I think it's pretty guaranteed at some point that one of your guys is going to take a hit that doesn't kill him. And that does it for the Surge. Moving on to the score in the end phase card, there's Death's Domain. Score this in an end phase if your warband holds all objectives in one or more players' territory, worth 2. I'm giving this an S, mostly because I've given it an S to other warbands who have a similar card. It could be a situation where you just have to hold 1 objective token and then you get 2 glory in an end phase. So I think that's pretty powerful. There's Grave Lords Hybrid. Score this in an end phase if 2 or more surviving friendly fighters are inspired, or each surviving friendly fighter has 2 or more upgrades, worth 2 glory. So it's pretty nice. It's versatile. Have to upgrade all of your guys, which can be a challenge. But I mean, if some of your guys die, it becomes easier to pull off. Similar with Inspiring, which isn't super hard to pull off, depending on how successful you are at killing enemies in melee. So yeah, give that one an A. Also worth 2 glory, which is nice. There's On the Chase, which is a hybrid. Score this in an end phase if each surviving friendly fighter has 1 or more hunger counters, or 1 or more surviving friendly fighters has a move characteristic of 6 or more, worth 1. So giving this a B, could be worth an A. Only giving it a B really because it's only worth 1 in an end phase. If the flying dude gets Bloodthirst though, then you kind of score this immediately so long as he's alive in an end phase. So I mean, pretty easy to score, could be worth an A. Next is Recovered Poise. Score this in an end phase if 1 or more friendly fighters are inspired, worth 1. Giving that an A as well because it's pretty likely to be the case. Next is Red Ruin. Score this in an end phase if 3 or more enemy fighters are out of action, worth 2 glory. Giving that a B, I like this one, but not effective against elite warbands or just low unit warbands in general. Great against horde warbands though. There's Worthy Opponents, worth 1. Scores an end phase if 1 or more opponents has the same number of glory points as you or more glory points than you. So given this a B, might be worth a C. It's catching up with a little bit more versatility. But I mean, obviously it's your goal to have more glory points. This becomes a good backup tool for catching up, but not super great. And that does it for the score in the end phase. 1 score in the third end phase card. It's Blood Curse, which is a hybrid. Scores in the third end phase if surviving friendly fighters have 10 or more hunger counters, or there's only 1 surviving enemy fighter, worth 3 glory. So I think this is pretty hard to pull off. I do like the 3 glory. Having 10 counters, I mean, that's definitely not a guarantee. I mean, if all of your guys are alive and you haven't made any effort to remove hunger counters, then it's very likely to happen. Having only 1 surviving enemy fighter is also not a guarantee. So worth a lot, high risk, high reward. I'm not a huge fan. So that does it for the objectives, which typically promote taking enemy fighters out of action in various ways, surviving attacks, holding objective tokens, controlling hunger counters, equipping upgrades, increasing movement speed, and managing glory points. So moving on to the power cards, we have the Ploys. Then the spells, starting with Bestial Transformation, choose one friendly fighter, discard that fighter's upgrades. That fighter's range 1 attack actions have Cleave and Ensnare, and each enemy fighter is a quarry. This effect persists until that fighter is given an upgrade or until that fighter is taken out of action. So pretty cool. Prevents you from putting any upgrades on a fighter, but allows him to get Cleave and Snare and makes everybody a quarry, just like Hrothgorn does. I'm giving it an A. I think it's pretty cool. There's Blood Vial. Choose one friendly fighter, remove up to 2 of the chosen fighter's hunger counters, and heal 1 to the chosen fighter. So I'll give this an A as well. If it's your goal to remove hunger counters, this does a really good job and heals you. Also cool thematically. There's Deathly Apotheosis. Choose one friendly fighter. While that fighter has Bloodthirst, give that fighter 1 hunger counter at the end of the action phase and heal 1 that fighter each time that fighter is given 1 or more hunger counters. So it allows them just get increasingly hungry and heal as that happens. Alternatively, while the fighter is inspired, you can reroll 1 dice in that fighter's attack rolls. And this effect persists until that fighter is taken out of action. So it lasts the whole match. I think it's pretty cool. I'm giving it an A. Could be worth an S. Next is Driven to Hunt, restricted to the leader. Pick 1. Give 1 hunger counter to each friendly fighter within 2 hexes of your leader, or push 1 other friendly fighter within 2 hexes of your leader up to 1 hex. So it allows you to pour on the hunger or get a simple kind of restricted push. I'm giving it an A. I think it's good. Next is Mighty Strike. Plain old +1 damage on the first attack action. I think it's pretty good, giving it a B, as I've given it for other warbands. There's Quicksilver Advance. Choose 1 friendly fighter, then pick 1. The chosen fighter makes 1 move action, and you remove 1 of that fighter's charge tokens and give that fighter 1 move token. So either a free move or swap a charge for a move. Both are great. I'm giving this an A. Could be worth an S. Next is Startling Competence. As a reaction, play this after an enemy fighter's attack action that deals damage to a friendly fighter. Pick 1, remove 1 of that friendly fighter's hunger counters, or draw 1 power card, or push that friendly fighter 1 hex. So it gives you some versatile options after you take a hit. Giving it an A. I think it's good. Next is Tenebrous Form. You choose a friendly fighter. That fighter's defense characteristic becomes 3 dodge, but that fighter can't do anything. They can't make it actions or reactions. They can't cast spells. They can't be on guard. They can't hold objectives, and they can't be driven back. It persists until the end of the phase or until the fighter is taken out of action. So a really good way just to make one of your fighters kind of off the grid for the round. I'm not really sure exactly what context that this would be useful in, so I'm giving that a C. I don't really like it. Moving on to the spells, there's Dark Glamour, which is easy to cast in theory with 1 channel. If cast, choose 1 enemy fighter within 3 hexes and give the chosen fighter 1 move token. So nice Transfixing Stare type card. But these guys are not very good spell casters, at least at base, so I'm giving this a B. There's Dark Hunger, which takes a focus to cast, which is even harder. Choose 1 fighter within 4 hexes of the caster and give the chosen fighter 2 hunger counters. In addition, if cast, you can remove 1 hunger counter from the caster. So a little hunger counter manipulation, giving it a B. Pretty good card, but hard to cast. And that does it for the Gambits, which typically promote making quarries, healing, manipulating hunger counters, improving attack accuracy, improving damage, influencing friendly and enemy mobility, pushing friendly fighters, and drawing power cards. And this brings me finally to the upgrades, starting with the first one, which is Vampiric Might, which does +1 damage to this fighter's range 1 and 2 attack actions if this fighter's inspired, or +2 damage to their range 1 and range 2 attack actions on a critical hit if this fighter has Bloodthirst. Given this an S. It's great strength, but can potentially do +2 damage, which is really, really nice. Next is Von Marusi Armor. If this fighter is inspired, reduce all damage dealt to this fighter by 1 to a minimum of 1. And if this fighter has Bloodthirst, this fighter would be dealt precisely 1 damage. It's not dealt any damage. So interesting little damage reduction mechanic. Giving it an S as well. Always useful. There's Blood Chalice, restricted to wizards. When you give this to a fighter, remove that fighter's hunger counters. They become a +1 wizard level, and they can't get any hunger counters. So it makes one of your wizards very effective, allowing you to use that inspired spell and never risk coming out of your inspired condition. So very, very nice card, giving this an S. There's Deathly Majesty, -1 dice from adjacent fighters' attack actions that target this fighter to a minimum of 1. Restricted to your leader. Giving this an A. Can definitely really screw the enemy over. There's Vampiric Speed, which is +1 move or +2 move if this fighter is Bloodthirst or inspired. So giving this an S, I mean, a +2 move is just great. There's Undying Evil, which as a reaction during an attack action that targets this fighter before the deal damage step, if this fighter would be taken out of action by that attack action, roll 1 defense dice on a roll of shield, so 33%, the combat sequence ends, and after this reaction, discard this card. So it can save your guy's life on a 33% chance roll 1 time, giving it a B. Swingy, but epic if it works. There's Glutton for Gore. When this fighter is given 1 or more hunger counters, instead give this fighter that many +1 additional hunger counters. When 1 or more of this fighter's hunger counters are removed, instead remove that many +1 additional hunger counter. So it just doubles the removal and doubles the gaining of hunger counters, allowing you to quickly inspire or bloodthirst. Nice. Giving it a B, might be worth an A. Decided to give it a B. There's Mirror Duelist, restricted to Velis. This fighter is considered to have 1 additional supporting fighter. Always useful. Only applies to this fighter though, so if she dies, it becomes useless, so I'm giving it a B. There's Enforcer's Cloak. As a reaction after an attack action that targets this fighter, place this fighter in an empty hex adjacent to the attacker, then discard this card. So interesting teleport mechanic, which isn't great against melee attackers, although it could give you a positional advantage, but it's very nice against range attackers, although restricted to Gorath exclusively. Giving it a B. I like it, but not enough to give it a higher ranking than this. And finally, there's Ripping Claws. As a reaction after this fighter's successful Savage Assault attack action, deal 1 damage to the target. So an extra damage to Aeneas after an attack. Giving it a B. It's nice. It's not great though. And that actually does it. So upgrades typically promote increasing damage, improving accuracy, resisting damage, increasing wizard level, decreasing enemy accuracy, improving movement, manipulating hunger counters, and teleporting. So that does it for the assessment of all of these cards. And here's the overview. So as you can see, objectives are pretty good. I mean, 2 S-ranked ones that are pretty much going to every deck, 4 A-ranked ones, which are solid. The rest are hit or miss. Gambit cards, I'd say none are amazing, but many are good. Very good, in fact. 6 A-ranked cards. Upgrades also very good. I mean, 4 S-ranked, 1 A, lots that aren't exceptional, but I mean, overall, lots of great cards to pick from. And that brings me to the last stage of this video where I'm going to be rating this warband. But first, I just wanted to revisit the tier list that I had already put together. So first, I just want to say that it's very difficult to rank and rate all of these warbands. There's a lot of them. They all operate differently. There's fluctuating metas, which cause certain play styles to excel in some circumstances and then to decline in other circumstances. So I try to keep in mind not only the fighter's inherent abilities and versatility, I also have to keep in mind the cards that these guys have, especially their objective cards, to see what they're capable of doing in any given meta. And it's tricky and it's subjective, and there are lots of variables such as the newly introduced primacy counter, which caused me to shuffle these things around, as I mentioned in my previous video on the Lizardmen. And I decided to shuffle things a little bit once again because I didn't take heavily into account the effective restricted cards when I was putting these things together. And I mean, I know the restrictions have been out for a while, but Grimwatch has 2 restricted cards, which really do limit the options that they have in deck building. Thorn of the Briarqueen even more so with 3 restricted cards. I mean, Morgox has 1 restricted card, but I feel is a little bit less impactful. And Morgox are just dangerous with their ability to basically one-shot Molog in the right circumstances, to have super high accuracy, to still have a push mechanic to be tough as balls. And I don't think that they have the greatest objective cards, which is why I had kept them in the A ranking up until now. But I decided just to shuffle things around a bit. As I mentioned, I'm moving Grimwatch down to the A tier. I'm moving Thorns back just 1 point, and I'm putting Morgox up to 2nd place overall. I still think Lady Harrows is the most solid warband if we look at all metas from season 1 to the current meta. And I think this current situation better represents the reality of how these warbands should be rated. Now, moving on to rate this latest warband, the Crimson Court, here is my assessment. First point, these guys are durable. They have durable units. They have versatile method of inspiring or bloodthirsting, which is cool and gives them some options, but also does require planning and effort, which can be tricky, and especially for new players can make these guys difficult to optimize. They have that hunger counter mechanic, which increases their versatility, as I just mentioned, but it also must be catered to with power cards, and this is very important. Whereas some warbands have a lot of liberty in the power card choices that they take, being able to optimize themselves in a given meta, these guys certainly do have to take many cards just to manage their hunger counters if you want to play them effectively. and that's a little bit impairing. They do have many special abilities, though. They have hunters, they have wizards, they have many unique and special options available to them, which is very good. And they also have generally good card, as I mentioned a bit previously, which allow them to profit from doing what they're inherently good at. They can also manipulate their hunger mechanic, and this is just fun. And when I look at all of these factors, I've decided to rate this warband as an A, and this is how I put them in the greater scheme of things in the A tier, as I just mentioned, but just after Mollog. But I do put them ahead of the Dread Pageant. In fact, I put them ahead of all of the currently released Season 4 warbands, not by a lot though, but mostly their toughness, their durability, their ability to either bloodthirst or inspire, the inherent cards that they have that help them optimize this mechanic. They are definitely a force to be reckoned with. And I have not even play tested this, so this is very theoretical, and I do reserve the right to modify this tier list as I see how they work in action. But at least as it stands right now, this is how I rate them. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy, please like and subscribe. If you have any thoughts or suggestions, please comment below. And I will be releasing videos in the near future as new content gets released, reviewing the next 2 warbands that are going to get released from that starter pack. And I might comment on other things that come up in Warhammer Underworld's news as time progresses. So thanks for watching, and I hope you have a nice day.